Okay, right, off we go, guys. Everyone who's coming on board now. Uh, Guys, we've got Dr. Quinton from Mingara Medical with us here today. Quinton is a GP and a lifestyle medicine practitioner, and he operates in from Mingara Medical, as I've already said. So, Quinton, if I could just get you to give a little bit of an introduction, if you wouldn't mind, please, mate. Just tell us a bit of your background, and then we'll get into it from there.
Thanks, Jay. I will. I'll try and keep it brief. I'll try and explain how I got to sitting here talking to you, which has been an interesting ride. So I've been in medicine 20 years. I did my training in South Africa. Lived in Canada for 10 years. I worked there as a emergency doc, as a hospitalist, as a general practitioner. Came to the coast on holidays. Absolutely loved it. Couldn't wait to get back. Moved here 6 months later. I've never looked back. I mean, nothing against Canada, obviously, but a beautiful, beautiful place, amazing lifestyle. I worked in the hospitals in Gosford in the intensive care. I worked in Wyong in what they then call the high dependency unit, which is now in intensive care. I worked in emergency medicine, kind of because of my own lifestyle reasons. I then decided to go back into general practice. Worked in Wambarol for a couple of years and then opened Mingara Medical in Tumbi, and that's now been running for 7 years. So general practice for now, kind of starting to show my age, pretty varied background, and I'm going to throw it in right away, and a few people may have heard me say that already. I'm not on here because I'm a specialist in infectious diseases or in viruses or in global pandemics. I'm not a public health doctor. If you want very good academic information, you're probably talking to the wrong person, sorry. But I do know the coast. And by last week, I just found that I'm not really getting any information that pertains to me. You know, we know we're in the midst of a pandemic, and we'll obviously be talking about that a lot. But how does that apply to what happens on the coast today, tomorrow? And I started searching. Surely somebody would have set up page or a site or something. I couldn't find one, so I set up a little Facebook page. I'm not really someone who does a lot on social media. Set up a site. I invited a few friends, thinking, let's just at least share some info. Right? I think I started with about 30. You were one of them.
Yep.
It grew and grew. It's a private group. The next morning it was 400. And I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? Got some moderators involved. I'd never even known before Friday what a moderator on a Facebook page did. The next day it was 1,000. Today we are sitting on Friday afternoon. It's a week later. We're sitting on 12,000. To put that in perspective, I think we've declined probably 2 people for every one we've actually accepted into the group. So the whole idea of the group has been to just be a information source for people off the Central Coast, just to know what's happening, what's relevant news to us, what's happening, which shops are open, which businesses are running, just things that actually change. There's not a lot that's happening. Yeah, we see all the doom and gloom in the other countries, and we can't ignore that. It's very important information to have. But what happens in Italy or France or China or the US today doesn't necessarily affect my life on the Central Coast that much. Yes, it's the economics and all of that, and I'm not denying any of that, but so this was just a group for coasties. We're really trying hard to keep it at that. There's probably some people that are not from the coast, but if I had opened this as a public campaign, we would have had members now in the hundreds of thousands, which was never the purpose. And it's not something that I'm proud of, but it does show the significant amount of interest and anxiety that's out there.
And I think if you don't mind me saying, an important part of that as well is that evidence from different countries is purely circumstantial to that country as well. In terms of there's so many aspects that can actually affect their results. What's happening in their country, so it doesn't necessarily relate to what's happening here.
Absolutely. So we're seeing all these trends. We saw what happened in China, and then we saw this starting to spread. It started going into Europe. But there's a huge variation even in European countries. There's a big difference. What's happening in Italy versus what's happening in Germany. And there are some factors that we're all speculating on. But to be honest, there's a lot of speculation involved. Each country has its own healthcare system. Each country has its own set of cultures.
Mm.
The virus entered countries in different ways. It was spread initially in different ways. There's different timelines involved. It probably helps us in Australia a little bit, the fact that we're kind of lagging behind a little bit. It possibly helps us that our weather is a bit warmer at the moment, but that's pure speculation. So you're absolutely right. And I did a post on Facebook last night, which I thought I'd be sending out to the Central Coast, but it's gone a bit wider than that. But we don't know what happens on the coast, how much that pertains on what happens in other places. It's really, really difficult to predict. We're probably in a situation now where we kind of have to prepare for the worst, hope for the best, but just take it as good as we can.
Okay. With on that topic, obviously there's a few questions that I want to ask you, and these are probably questions that are in a lot of people's minds as well. So I just want to start from the beginning, so we can sort of build out, so people have a context of what we're talking about. So firstly, from my sort of perspective, what is a pandemic? Like what is that? And what we hear this word all the time. We're hearing it in the news. We hear it from obviously all the specialists. But what is it? What's the definition of a pandemic?
Okay, so an epidemic is a disease that spreads rapidly to a large number of people.
Okay.
It's that simple, and it could be caused by a virus, by a bacteria. It could be caused by anything, and there are multiple. There's an annual flu epidemic, if you want to call that, in Australia, and it kind of hits us in the winter months. You have your flu jab, April, May. People get their flu in June, July, August, and then it goes away again. And next year we wait for the next heat. That's an epidemic. That can also be seen as a pandemic because it's the same organism that goes to many, many countries in the world. So as far as the exact definition, if a critical mass of humans and countries are involved, the WHO will then declare a pandemic. It literally means it's in the majority of countries in the world. From my understanding, that then triggers certain mechanisms that can be put into place and possibly funding models and whatnot.
Okay.
But essentially a pandemic is something that spreads across the world. In the history, there's been very, very famous pandemics, and they range from 1 or 2 or 3 million deaths to hundreds of millions of deaths.
Depending on the severity of it.
This virus initially was an epidemic from China. On the 11th of March, the WHO declared it as an official pandemic, which is right now sitting here blows my mind. That's 2 weeks ago, right? So we've only been talking about a pandemic for 2 weeks, but here we are, and our lives have all changed substantially in the past few days alone.
On that topic then, just obviously the name, you hear a lot of this, as obviously coronavirus, and then you see this obviously COVID-19. So what actually is the virus?
So coronavirus is a group. It's a family of viruses. Again, disclaimer: I'm not a specialist in these things, but it's a cold virus. It's a common cold virus. When someone has a common cold, a runny nose, sniffles, they have a coronavirus or a rhinovirus or an adenovirus. These are very, very common viruses. Okay. The problem with this one is it is new. That's why it's called a novel virus. The COVID is just a name it was given because it is now such a significant issue that's happened. But it's a novel coronavirus, which means it's a new mutation, which means none of us have ever had any exposure to it. And that is why it's potentially, that amongst many other factors, but that's one of the factors why it's so devastating, is because it is new. The human body has no real resistance. So your immunity that you get to this virus, you're building up from scratch. If you are exposed to something like an influenza virus, yes, every year for the most part, it's a relatively new virus, but it's not completely new. Your body has seen something similar, or you've had a flu jab, which is possibly quite accurate in determining how your body is going to build up immunity and fight this. So, and that's part of why the flu is not as devastating. If we suddenly had a completely new influenza virus and we have no immunization that's effective, then that's when we get another huge epidemic or a pandemic of influenza. So it's possible. In this case, it happened to be a very humble, very small, little insignificant virus, and it's just happened to mutate in this way that is incredibly different and incredibly new, and it's just rapidly taken over the world.
So is this right in thinking that it's not since we had this sort of Spanish flu epidemic back in sort of 1918? This is the biggest since then.
I would say so. There's been pandemics since. So HIV was also classified officially as a pandemic.
Right. Okay.
But it's not something that has spread across the world to most people in such a short time. To be honest, if you look at all these curves, everybody talks about curves, and we can talk curves all night, but we're still in the start of that. We don't know where that curve is eventually going to start turning. So it's really difficult to predict where this is all going to end, what the human mortality rates are going to be. We literally just don't know.
And why is it spreading so quickly, mate? What are the reasons for that? Because we see this all the time, obviously, that it's spreading. The rate of spread is sort of exponential. Why is it spreading so quickly?
It is, if it wasn't so deadly, I would say it is in medicine the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Right? So wow. It's a virus that does not cause symptoms initially. So the average time for someone to develop symptoms is roughly 5 or 6 days if they're going to have symptoms. So you can acquire this virus and spread it around without knowing that you're sick, number one. Number two, it's super contagious, right? So we've all read, it stays alive and lasts that long, and it stayed alive on tabletops that long. It's super contagious. So one person literally can infect hundreds, again, without knowing. The symptoms are so mild that even if most people, 80% of people, are going to show very mild symptoms, none more than your little bit of a runny nose or a cold or a slight fever. So they will keep on working, they'll function, they'll be in the community, they'll be spreading it around. So if you take all of that into consideration, then it's an absolutely incredible little organism. And it will keep on spreading and spreading and spreading as long as there is human-to-human contact or human contact to a surface, to another human. It will just keep on spreading until it's run its course. And where is that line? It's really difficult to know.
It's is it in that way, is it unprecedented in the fact that the symptoms can be carried, but it's not knowing. A person can carry it and might even know that they've had it, and the symptoms they have might be mild. So the symptoms will obviously vary dependent on the person who contracts it, age range, obviously, chronic conditions and so on and so forth. But is it quite unprecedented in the way that it can, almost stay hidden to a large extent before it's too late?
It's totally unprecedented. I've never seen, if you get influenza, you've had the flu, it knocks you hard. You've had man flu, I would say.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes.
Your wife would say. She would know it knocks you really hard. You're in bed for a couple of days. You don't go out. You don't go socialize. You're just not up to it. But with this one, you just kind of carry on. Take something like Ebola, which is a scary word just to even say it. By the time someone is contagious, they're bleeding, they're in bed, they look awful. You're not going to get close to them. But with this one, life goes on. You're out there, you're socializing, you're shaking hands. It's absolutely unprecedented. I've in my 20 years of medicine, I've never heard of anything like this.
I heard someone describe it, and it might have been yourself actually, mate. I heard someone describe it as the silent plague. From what you're saying there, there's no truer analogy for it, and certainly in my mind anyway, because it's not something you can see. Obviously all viruses are invisible to the naked eye, but it's not something you can even see within the other person. So you're constantly sort of looking and wondering whether, either you're a carrier or someone else is a carrier, what to do, what not to do. It creates an awful lot of uncertainty.
And I can't take credit. I didn't say that, but it is a silent plague. It is a plague in a way. It is absolutely silent. And the risk is exactly that, is you can be spreading it around. So we're trying to tell people through this Facebook group and through our practice page and at the practice, and we phone patients and we say, look, pretend you have the plague. Those are actually words that I use. But how do you do that effectively? And then you almost now have to treat every other person out there as if they have the plague, you know, but yet we all look okay, we all function okay. It's an absolutely silent, and you know, again, this is not about scaremongering.
No.
The vast majority of people that get this will be okay, right? They'll be just fine. They may have no symptoms. They may be sick for a while, and then they'll get better. But unfortunately, there's a significant proportion that will end up deteriorating and getting worse and worse and worse.
So, and it's probably going to sound like a stupid question, really, considering what we've just talked about. But what can we do now? Like, what can we do? Why is it important that we act now? Because we hear this a lot, don't we? Like, we've got to act now, we've got to act now. When you listen to reports that come from Italy or from a lot of the other countries, they're saying, look, we wish we would have acted sooner. You know, why is it so important that we act now?
The reason is what most people don't understand about exponential growth. And that is, if you give this to 10 people, and in a couple of days, if it doubles, they'll give it to 10 people or 20 people, and then that becomes 40, and that becomes 80, and that becomes 160. And initially, it seems very, very slow, and you can't really see that there's any significant difference. But that time frame for someone to get the virus, like I said, 5 to 6 days of having no symptoms at all, then maybe a week or two of getting increasingly ill. Because we have what's called a doubling rate. A doubling rate is each time you get to a double amount of people that have it. That doubling rate is 3 or 4 days. So after 2 weeks of doubling, suddenly those numbers go really high. I did a video on Facebook last night. Have a look at that. I won't explain it all again. But eventually you get to doubling rates of 5,000. And then a few days later it's 10,000. And then a few days later it's 20 and 40. And then it's an absolute disaster. And that's what we're trying to prevent. So to come back to your question, why are we taking action now? We're taking action now because we know it's in Australia. We know it's in the Central Coast. This is our local community. We have roughly 70 cases today. We had 19 cases earlier in the week or end of last week, right? So the math will start showing itself. We'll start seeing trends of, and again, you mentioned, how much of the international data applies to us. We're going to know in the next week because we can start trending our own trajectory. We can see how steep our own curve is, and then we'll start realizing our own doubling rate. That doubling rate is a relative constant. So it's going to either double every 3 days or every 4 days or every 5 days. And it sounds, again, it sounds benign. It sounds like there's no big difference there. But the difference between 3 days and 5 days is absolutely massive if you start looking at the tail end of when 30 or 40 or 50,000 people could have this, right? So we are now, the next few days, we are in that early phase where we can actually, what's called flatten that curve. In other words, if we can stop contact, if we can stop people moving, we can stop contact, we can stop the spread of this virus, we can actually really substantially reduce the number of people that end up getting this. But if hundreds and thousands of people get this in the next few days, we probably reach some kind of a tipping point where you can then go, well, social isolation has failed, right? So if we leave this for 2 weeks, we're too late, definitely. But where do we push that boundary down to? Is 10 days okay? Is 7 days okay? Is 5 days okay? I don't know. That's why my message to everybody, everywhere, has been, just stop it now. Whatever you do, don't go out, don't mingle, don't socialize, don't shake hands. Whatever you touch, clean it, wash your hands. We'll talk about all those measures, but the time is absolutely now. And if we miss this window, it will be devastating.
Am I right in thinking, we've heard a lot of this terminology with regards to, flattening the curve. And as you say, you did a great video on that yesterday, which went viral almost all around the world to a certain degree. But in that context, we're talking about flattening the curve. Can you just explain just briefly, because I'll refer guys to that video, but can you just explain briefly why it's important to be able to flatten that curve and what it means in terms of the healthcare structures if we don't?
I can. I'll try and explain it in words. It's a little bit longer. I've got my now infamous whiteboard behind me, but I'm try and not use it if I can. I did get some comments on my use of tech. The steeper that curve, the more people get this quickly, and there are constant numbers in there, roughly 15 or 20%, and we'll get our data soon, but make it 20%. 20% of people are going to get sick. They're going to need hospital, right? The steeper that curve, the more people need hospital within the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and the hospital systems just get absolutely overwhelmed. Think about this. They are generally, this time of year, they are relatively full already. So it's not like all the other diseases and the accidents and everything else goes, no, we'll take a step back. People are still having their heart attacks, their strokes, everything else carries on, except now we're adding this extra burden, number one. Number two, a lot of hospital people are frontline. They're going to get affected. They're going to get sick. So you're working in an overburdened system that's not prepared, and you cannot blame anybody for not being prepared for this because it's unprecedented. Nobody saw this coming. Right? So you're working with half staff in a hospital that's already relatively full, and now suddenly on one day you get 50 patients extra, but 4 days later you get 100, and then 4 days later you get 200, and 4 days later you get 400. And those people don't stay in hospital overnight. They stay in hospital for roughly a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in total. And that problem is even worse based on the ratio of actual intensive care beds. So if somebody gets a really, really severe case of this, they end up needing what's called a ventilator or a respirator. They need a machine to help them breathe. They stay on that machine for multiple days. It's very intensive. Place like Wyong Hospital, the last time I worked there, had 8 intensive care beds. There's a chance that we may be using those beds, in 10 days or 2 weeks. But then what do we do 4 days after that, right? And what do we do 4 days after that? That's where it becomes really difficult. That's where doctors start making really, really tough decisions.
And it makes perfect sense. And I think, as we've said before, this is not about scaremongering. It's not about filling people with panic and fear, but it is about giving them a realistic view of what the data and the statistics and what the medical science says as well. And
absolutely. Now, the flip side of that coin is if we can flatten that curve. So say we can enforce social distancing. They say and again, I don't know all the numbers for a fact, but they say if you can take 80% of your community and put them inside, that 20% will probably not spread the disease that significantly, right? But immediately, that number of doubling days immediately goes up. Immediately, within a day, you'll start seeing a change. If we can get the doubling time to over 6 or 7 days, then the curve flattens automatically. The virus just lingers in the community. The medical systems have time to adapt. They have time to manage. The doctors that get sick have time to get better. That will take longer. It'll still be a massive strain. Like people think flatten the curve will be fine. It'll still be a huge strain on the system. It'll still overrun the system. But the sheer number, the sheer volume is substantially lower.
And as you say, it's not like the world stops. People are still going to have children. There's still people going to be breaking legs. There's still people going to be having heart attacks. It's the ripple effect out from that epidemic and that over the system being overrun, really, isn't it?
That's right.
Right.
And then that's medically speaking. But then we can start talking about the obvious economic impact, the mental health impact. I mean, where does this stop?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, actually, mate, because there is a point that I wanted to bring up tonight, was that, as this goes on, we're obviously seeing the stress, we're obviously seeing the fear, which is happening, rightly so, in and around, obviously, the economic situation and everything that's happening with the virus as well. But also I can see this as it goes on. I can see the longevity playing its role in mental health as well, because of that isolation aspect, because of the fact that people are going to have all this pressure on them with regards to, as you already said, the economic system. But also as well is that there's a lot of people out there that already do have some form of mental health issue that's actually already in place as well, and all of a sudden being even more isolated, being even more contained, and their usual outlets being taken away. It's that effect that also, obviously I'm concerned about now, but it's that effect that runs parallel to that that's going to happen, in this next weeks and months as well.
It's Jay, it's something that I see on a first-hand basis. We have psychologists that are suddenly now not able to see their patients face to face. Well, they see them on a screen, but is that therapeutically, is it the same? How good is it for somebody's mental health to suddenly be socially isolated? We are social animals. We are people that want to get out. We want to, especially in Australia, the weather is good. You want to get out. You want to socialize. You want to see your mate. Right? We don't know how long this is going to last. So, in general practice, they say roughly 30 to 50% of what I, as a doctor, see every single day has some connotation to mental health, which means there's a massive proportion of people out there that have issues, and that's multifactorial. It's a crazy busy life we have. There's huge expectations. There's financial problems. There's a lot of reasons, lack of sleep, you name it. You deal with these things as much as I do. But as you say, people are already predisposed to having substantial problems, and now adding all this uncertainty on top of that. And then you have someone like me who shows them all kinds of scary graphs, because I feel the need to do that, because I'm trying to help people to see the reality, right? But it's not a good picture. It's a real worry. And what's the fallout going to be 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now? What's the effect on our kids living through this? How important is it? And that's where your systems and your goals and your pillars of what you teach, that's where that becomes so incredibly important in times like this. We have to fall back on trying to get that resilience back and try and work through this and try and be role models and try and be strong. But yet we are fearful. It's a very difficult balancing act. And if you have good principles in place, then fine. But many people just don't.
Yeah, and that's the issue, isn't it? And I really want to be able to just to finish with that tonight, because it's important. It's important we go through. It's important that we get clarity. It's important that we get data and we're real about what's happening. But I want to leave people with a sense of with empowerment. I want to leave people with a sense of hope in terms of what they can actually do now to actually get those pillars in place, make sure that they're taking care of themselves. Make sure that they're taking care of the families, and then what they can actually do through this period of time to actually help them to move forward. Because, obviously the power of giving them a positive message to be able to work forward. And as we've said it before, yes, this is a period where there's obviously a lot of things going on. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're spinning an awful lot of plates. The messages seem to be doom and gloom, which is coming out. But I believe that this is a time that we can actually use to thrive and actually move on, and get rid of some of the things that we don't need, and concentrate on more of the things that are important, such as our health, such as our well-being, such as our mental health, such as our connection with our family. So I just want to leave them with a message in terms of, a positive message, rather, that the things that they can actually do. What would your perspective be on that, mate, in terms of moving forward? What are those things that people can take hold of now and actually put in place now that can give them that sense of just personal strength back again?
If you look at predictors of wellness, if you take away somebody's health, that's probably their number one issue in their life. That's what people value the most, is their health, right? And based secondly, or close second, or in conjunction with that, their family and their family's welfare. Right? Now, this problem is affecting both of those on a major scale, and that's the dire implication of what we're dealing with. So, what can you do? There's no miracle drug coming. Yes, there's talks of medications and hydrochloroquine and antivirals and this and that and immunizations. Right now, today, to move this in a different direction. There's no medication, there's no immunization, there's no intervention. We cannot wait for somebody else. We cannot wait for the government to come and say, do this or do that. We have to take control of this, especially, I'm talking about the residents of the Central Coast. Yes, this may go wider. It may affect other communities in a similar way. I don't know, but I'm speaking about our people. What can we do? We have to be responsible. We have to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions, because what we do, what you and I do today or tonight or tomorrow, affects people around us, and affects them not tomorrow necessarily, but it may affect them 2 or 3 weeks. And it may not be 2 or 3 people you affect. It may be 200 or 300 people, right? So number one, take responsibility. Number two, we're probably in this for the long haul. We don't know how long this is going to last, but this is a new way of life for now. So accept that. You can fight it. You can scream. You can whinge on Facebook and use lots of exclamation marks and bold letters and capital letters. It changes nothing for anybody, right? Accept that this is life right now. We've got to face this and we've got to deal with it, right? And number three, take care. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. Take care of your family, your friends, your colleagues at work. Everybody is struggling. Be a positive voice. Stop with the anxiety. Stop with the fear-mongering. Stop with the toilet rolls. Be a positive influence as much as you can, right?
Yeah.
And in taking care, how do you take care of yourself? This, mind-blowingly, goes back to all the basics that you teach in your groups. You eat good, nutritious, healthy food. You do regular exercise, because there's a lot of science in how exercise is not only good for you, but it helps you sleep. It helps your stress hormones, right? You try and get some good sleep. Try and build in good sleep patterns. Try and focus away. I mean, we're talking on social media likely with many people here, but try and take some time out of that every day. Try and reconnect with the family. You know, I've been going home in the afternoons, and I've been playing table tennis with my son, and I'm getting smashed every afternoon, but it's the best part of my day, and I'm pretty sure for him as well. But reconnect. Try and rediscover those things that we never have time for. Right now, suddenly we have time for them. You know, start doing those things. Have purpose. Be a positive influence in your own community. Be a positive voice out there. Take care of yourself and your family. Stay safe. That's the number one thing, is just be careful. Only go out when you have to, at least for the next few weeks. Make sure to wash your hands, all the things that is splattered all over the media. But if you don't do that, this is going to end badly. So I hope that's a positive voice. That's as positive as I can be about this. Yes, I think a lot of good will come out of this. I see a lot of good. I see a lot of attitude change. I've seen a lot of good in our business. I think it is going to be a different world in a few months from now. And yes, there's going to be heart sore and there's going to be suffering. But we can, as humanity, especially as a community, we can get through this and be stronger for it. So let's do it.
Right, absolutely. And you know, we've talked about this before. I'm going to say this openly on here. We've talked about this before in terms of, look at this, we don't like this. None of us do. It's not something that we would have chose, but it's happened and it's happening. So there's either two boats that you can get on. From my point of view anyway, you could either get on the boat that just stays at the pier and just stays where it is and eventually sinks, or we can get on it and we can get out there and we can just, you know, sail to that new world, and along that way formulate in and around us, being able to cut away the things that aren't important, but really focus in on the things that are. And for me personally, as you've just already said, health, family, what really matters to you, and being able to connect and just being, you know, safe and well. And if we can concentrate on those things, you know, as I'm positive that we'll come through this, and when we do, we'll come out in a better space than we were previously as well.
Absolutely. I want to add one last thing. Your analogy of two boats is fantastic. What I would say is that second boat, don't wait for the winds. Row that boat. Row it as hard as you can. Right? I
like that.
And it takes every single person to row that boat. You can't wait for other people to do it for you.
Yeah.
So be as positive. We need every single person to take responsibility and to be as positive as you can. And before we head off, Jay, you did a video for our group the other day about what we're just talking about right now. I'm going to put a link in, if you can put a link into your feed, if anybody wants to go and watch that video, I think that is the way how we're going to get through this. Thank you so much for doing that again.
No
Thank
problem.
you for what you do for our local community. You are someone that I respect greatly. You've done a tremendous job in our community. You've got a lot of support out there. Take care of yourself, take care of your family. I know you've taken strain over the past few days. You've helped me with my 50-member Facebook group to grow it to 12,000 in a few days. Thank you so much. If anybody wants information on the local, I can't give more numbers that are there. We're trying to moderate that group as well as we can. But Central Coast Coronavirus Info is the Facebook group. Facebook group. Go and have a look. That's where things are happening. We'll try and keep it as clean and as functional as possible. So thanks for having me, Jay. Take care, and let's do this again sometime.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate your time, especially on a Friday night as well. You go and have as relaxing night as you can, my friend, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.